Yeah, when my doctor calls me, she said in, I don't know, 10 days or something, I'll tell her I didn't start right away for two reasons, right? I wanted to finish my grapefruit juice, and I also wanted to see about funding from the ministry. But also, one of the things I'll start telling her is bloating. Like right now, I didn't even eat much this morning, and it's 3 o'clock, and I'm very bloated. And, uh, and it's causing fatigue and it's pushing pressure on my heart. So that means it's not good for my heart. And it's not narcolepsy I have. Probably attention issues, but also fatigue from digestion. I've told her this already. So I'm going to say, well, thanks for, doing something simple at the beginning, except it was a lot of work for me, for blood pressure medicine. Might be helpful, but let's go kind of maybe more at the root of every kind of problem I had, including, as I said, depressions, right? When you can't achieve your goals because you can't focus, so you're too tired, and you're kind of disappointed yourself, right? You can't concentrate your mind, and you feel fatigue, and it's gotten worse since being in my teens, because being in my teens I was a lot more active and thinner, and now it's I was telling my mom, I was saying what I have to do now to exercise is I can't rely on sports anymore in Prince Rupert, and also with how my shoulders feel. And it's kind of hard getting orthotics without a doctor that's patient-centered, and without a Ministry of Poverty Creation that also isn't, you know, uh, recipients-centered. So without orthotics, there's a limit too to how my joints, for my hips and knees and ankles are still doing pretty good for all the competitive sports I've done, except that elevation I got to watch, right? The knees aren't used to hiking up and down. I'd have to train them slowly. And cycling, well, I'd have to change bicycles really to get a different one that's specifically for exercising. But even then, you rarely get to cardiovascular unless you're doing a lot of climbing, whether it's hiking or cycling. So jogging, I could, but again, you're investing in good shoes and good orthotics, and I could probably get good shoes, but the orthotics are very expensive, and it's been always jumping through too many hoops, as I've said before, without interacting with people that don't understand, things like how to be patient-centered, or how to be, helping people get out of poverty, because, for example, I did mention first time I got here that the Canada Post was hiring, and but that my orthotics are old and I'd need new shoes and orthotics, and can they pay that? And they said, well, after 3 months. Well, I wouldn't last 3 months. I'm walking every day with crappy shoes and old orthotics. So, and I said, well, I could do bicycle with a trailer, except they don't want to deviate from the norm of how they've done things. And somehow they're working on problems. I don't know. I think problems is just firing people because they don't want to do anything different. And of course, you can do things where you kind of put more of those community mailboxes. I'm not against that. There's actually more privacy than the way they deliver mail here, right? For example. So anyways, the doctor has got to maybe get back to the problem of digestion, because it might be genetic, but even if it's genetic in my family, it's still caused by particular organs or series of organs who kind of are not functioning like they should. And I'm not saying that I should get genetics, as the cure, like being injected with something that was adjusted for particular parts of my DNA. I'm just saying that it's weird how the specialist that talked to me didn't ask questions to show that he understood things. And when I'm at a pharmacy, and I don't know if that person's officially a pharmacist today, but they don't know where the enzymes are, and I kind of forcing them to come into the aisle. There's so little effort being done by pharmacists, by doctors, to actually, have conversations about how ignorant we are about digestion, nutrition, and how it varies by individuals, but also some things are quite apparently bad for everybody, but they're still such a big part of our grocery stores, right? and then we're kind of complaining, oh, our poisons are going to get more expensive because of tariffs or whatever it is, or this war of hatred where people hate so much that even in ceasefires they don't cease firing because there's so much hatred, you know. And you got to wonder how much people love themselves too, right? When they want their fix more, which is unhealthy for them, and they'll blame the medical system for not easily accessing things. But we should have a lot more specialists in gastrointestinal kind of issues, but also not just who cuts things out and says you're good. Like, it has to be somebody who's educated in the concept of nutrition and the microbiome, things we don't learn at school. And if we do, we don't learn about it enough. It should be repeated in everything. It should even be repeated in people that work with patients, because sometimes just change their friggin' diet and they won't be so grouchy because they're not so bloated and fatigued that they're giving up on things, or they're irritable all the time. So that it's such an important part. I got to convince my doctor next time, can you kind of stop thinking it's an imaginary narcolepsy diagnosis that you think we're not tracking down the paperwork of that's making me fatigued? It's not that. The fatigue is digestion related, I told her, and I hope she'll kind of start working for me, or at least for my health.